1915. The Antarctic crushes Sir Ernest Shackleton's ship and leaves 28 men isolated in a desolate world of ice and wind. No help, no hope, no escape. Shackleton made one single promise: no one dies. What followed was one of the most impossible survival stories that spanned 18 long months. This is Monochrome Documentaries. We bring you real stories from life's edge, tales of danger, courage, and the unbreakable human spirit. So subscribe to step into stories that defied all odds. Now let's dive back into this thrilling story. It all began with an ambitious objective, even for the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. Shackleton, already a known polar explorer, was not content with reaching the South Pole, a feat already claimed by Roald Amundsen. He set his sights on the last major objective: to be the first to cross the entire Antarctic continent on foot. His plan, the Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition, was extensive. One team, on the ship Aurora, would land on the Ross Sea side to lay supply depots. Shackleton himself would lead the main party of 28 men aboard a specially built vessel, the Endurance, to the opposite coast in the treacherous Weddell Sea. From there, they would start an 1,800-mile trek across the pole. The famous advertisement for the expedition laid the stakes bare. Men wanted for hazardous journey. Low wages, bitter cold, long hours of complete darkness, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in event of success. Thousands applied. Shackleton personally selected his crew, valuing optimism as highly as experience. He chose scientists, sailors, and a photographer, Frank Hurley, to document their triumph. The ship itself, originally named the Perilous, was a 144-foot vessel built of pine, oak, and dense green heartwood. Shackleton renamed her Endurance, after his family motto, "By endurance we conquer." He could not have known how fitting that name would become. On December 5, 1914, the Endurance steamed out of the whaling station at Grytviken, South Georgia. As the ship pointed south, the men were in high spirits for the upcoming expedition. It was the last time any of them would touch land for 497 days. The Weddell Sea was notorious. Unlike the Ross Sea, its clockwise gyre trapped and compacted ice, and whalers in South Georgia had warned Shackleton that conditions that year were the worst in memory. Still, Shackleton made the decision to proceed. For 2 days, the Endurance sailed open water. Then, they met the pack ice. At first, the ship skillfully navigated the floes, but by mid-January 1915, just a single day's sail from their landing site, a sudden gale slammed the ice together, creating an unbroken, inescapable mass. The Endurance was trapped. The ship was now completely immobilized. At first, the crew did not panic. They had been temporarily stuck before. The men passed the time playing football on the ice and tending to the 69 sled dogs. But days turned into weeks. The Antarctic summer began to fade, and temperatures dropped. Shackleton wrote in his diary, "I could no longer doubt that the Endurance was bound for the winter." Frozen into the pack, they were no longer a ship on an expedition, but passengers on a large, uncontrollable ice sheet drifting slowly north. The men converted the ship into a winter station, establishing routines to maintain morale. As a leader, Shackleton knew that low morale was a significant risk. But all around them, the ice shifted and made noise, a reminder of their situation. A small vessel in a harsh environment. Through the long months of winter darkness, the pressure on the ship became immense. The ice was a living thing, and its power was terrifying. The groaning of the ship's timbers became a constant, agonizing symphony. In October 1915, after 9 months in the ice's grip, the pressure reached its climax. The hull was breached, beams snapped, and the ship was lifted and tilted at a sickening angle. On October 27th, Shackleton faced the inevitable and gave the order he had dreaded: abandon ship. The men scrambled to salvage food, fuel, and 3 small lifeboats, setting up ocean camp on a thick ice sheet. From there, Shackleton and his crew watched as the ship was destroyed by the ice. For weeks, the ice relentlessly crushed the vessel. Then, on November 21st, the stern rose high in the air before the Endurance slipped beneath the surface, sinking nearly 10,000 feet. "She's going, boys," one man said. As his magnificent ship vanished, Shackleton felt the weight of 27 lives settle squarely on his shoulders. They were utterly alone, hundreds of miles from land, and their last link to the outside world just disappeared into the sea. With the ship gone, Shackleton's original objective was replaced by a new, more vital one: survival. He gathered his 27 men on the desolate ice and made them a solemn promise. He would see every single one of them home alive. It was a promise that would test the limits of his leadership. They established Patience Camp on their drifting ice sheet, hunting seals and penguins for food and fuel. Shackleton knew the psychological strain of their monotonous, landmarkless world was as dangerous as the cold. He broke down social hierarchies and insisted on routines, storytelling, and singing to combat despair. Meanwhile, the photographer Frank Hurley faced an agonizing decision with Shackleton. His heavy glass plate negatives had to be abandoned. Together, they reviewed over 500 plates, smashing 400 and saving only the 120 best, a heartbreaking sacrifice for survival. For 5 months, this was their existence. But in April 1916, as they drifted into warmer waters, the very ice beneath their feet began to break apart. Their precarious home was disintegrating fast, forcing a desperate choice between the devil and deep blue sea. Stay back, hoping for rescue, or face the merciless, incredibly dangerous Southern Ocean in 3 small, open boats. With their ice sheet continuing to shatter beneath them, Shackleton chose the deep blue sea. He ordered the 28 men into the 3 small lifeboats: the James Caird, the Dudley Docker, and the Stancomb-Wills. After 497 days stranded on ice, they were now at the mercy of the Southern Ocean. His target was a remote, uninhabited speck on their charts: Elephant Island. The 7-day journey was an ordeal. In the small, open boats, they were exposed to freezing waves. Their clothes froze. Thirst became a critical issue. Surrounded by salt water they couldn't drink. Killer whales were observed near the boats. Throughout the ordeal, Shackleton relied on the captain of the Endurance, Frank Worsley, whose navigational skill was nothing short of miraculous. With only fleeting glimpses of the sun, his hands numb with cold, Worsley made his sextant readings. The lives of all 28 men depended on his calculations. But after 7 grueling days, the cliffs of Elephant Island appeared through the gloom. They collapsed onto the shore, exhausted and frostbitten, the first time they had stood on solid ground in 497 days. But as Shackleton looked at the barren, storm-lashed rock, he knew they had only traded one wasteland for another. Elephant Island was a temporary reprieve, not a rescue. It was a desolate, mountainous island, devoid of vegetation, offering only rock, ice, and a dwindling supply of penguins. Shackleton knew that no rescue ships would ever pass this remote outpost. To remain here meant certain starvation. It was on this narrow, windswept beach that he made the most audacious decision of the entire ordeal. He would take the largest lifeboat, the 22.5-foot James Caird, and attempt to sail 800 miles across the Scotia Sea, one of the most violent stretches of ocean on the planet, to the whaling stations of South Georgia. It was a staggering gamble, but it was their only hope. Shackleton chose 5 of his most resolute men for the journey. Frank Worsley as navigator, the indomitable Tom Crean, the carpenter, Harry McNish, and 2 sailors, John Vincent and Timothy McCarthy. The remaining 22 men would be left under the command of his trusted deputy, Frank Wild. As Shackleton prepared to leave them, he looked back to see their faces. Faces of the men he was leaving behind, whose survival now depended entirely on his success. Before the journey could begin, the James Caird had to be transformed. The carpenter, Harry McNish, fashioned a makeshift deck from packing crates and sledge runners, sealing it with a mixture of oil paint, lamp wick, and seal blood to shield the men from the monstrous waves. On April 24, 1916, they launched into the furious 50s, a latitude infamous for its colossal waves. For 16 days, Shackleton and his men endured a living nightmare. Waves, estimated at over 100 feet, crashed over them, threatening to swamp the tiny boat. They were perpetually soaked and freezing, bailing water relentlessly. Ice coated the boat, threatening to capsize it and forcing the men to crawl onto the slippery deck to chip it away. Amidst this chaos, Worsley, the navigator, managed just 4 reliable solar sightings. The rest was dead reckoning. The slightest error would mean missing South Georgia and being lost forever in the immense, empty ocean. Then, after 16 days of torment, through a break in the spray, they spotted the dark cliffs of South Georgia. Worsley had done it. They had reached land, but their ordeal was far from over. Shackleton's relief was short-lived. A ferocious storm had driven them to the island's uninhabited southern coast. They were separated from the whaling stations by a wall of unmapped, glacier-carved mountains and treacherous crevasses. 2 of the men were too weak to continue. For the final, desperate push, it would be just 3: Shackleton, Worsley, and Tom Crean. With no tent, no sleeping bags, and only 50 feet of rope, they began their march. To get a grip on the ice, they hammered nails through the soles of their boots. They marched for 36 hours without rest, climbing glaciers and navigating hidden ice falls. At one point, facing a sheer drop, they coiled their rope and slid 900 feet down a snowy slope, a reckless gamble that could have sent them plunging into a crevasse. Finally, exhausted and frostbitten, they heard a sound drift across the mountains. The steam whistle of the Stromness whaling station. On May 20th, 1916, 3 figures with matted hair, faces blackened by blubber smoke, and clothes in tatters staggered into the station. The manager did not recognize the man he knew as Shackleton. When the explorer revealed his identity, the manager wept. Shackleton had quite literally returned from the dead. For Shackleton, there was no time for rest. His first act was to send a boat for the 3 men on the other side of the island. but his mind was consumed with the 22 men left on Elephant Island. Just 3 days after his arrival, he set out on a whaling vessel, but an impenetrable wall of pack ice, 70 miles thick, forced him back. A second attempt from South America failed. A third failed. For 3 agonizing months, every rescue attempt was defeated. Back on Elephant Island, Frank Wild held the men together. They lived under 2 overturned boats, their hope dwindling as the penguin and seal meat ran out. Wild forced the men to pack their belongings each morning, insisting they be ready for a rescue that felt increasingly unlikely. Finally, the Chilean government loaned Shackleton a small steam tug, the Yelcho. On August 30th, 1916, they approached Elephant Island to find the sea miraculously clear of ice. Through the mist, Shackleton raised his binoculars to the shore, frantically counting the figures. He counted them all. Turning to his rescuers, he cried, "They are all there. They are all safe." Within an hour, all 22 men were aboard. Not a single life from the Endurance had been lost. The Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition failed to cross the continent. Shackleton never achieved his original goal. But in the face of catastrophic failure, he achieved something far greater. He kept his promise. He led his men through nearly 2 years of unimaginable hardship and brought every single one of them home. His story remains one of history's most profound examples of leadership and the resilience of the human spirit. For over a century, the Endurance lay lost. But in March 2022, a search expedition finally found her. She sits upright and remarkably preserved on the seabed, nearly 10,000 feet down. The name Endurance still visible on her stern. It is a haunting tribute to the ship that carried these men into legend, and a final, silent witness to one of the greatest survival stories ever told.